Welcome back, everybody. It is Tuesday night, and it is time for another episode of Theater Talk Live. Now, today's show is going to be a cool one because we're going to talk about some tech that even I don't know a whole lot about, and I'm really excited to learn more and help spread the word about this great brand who has one of the best names out there, Modern Atomics. The name of this brand is really, really cool, and it's all about power. And to talk about Modern Atomics, we have Mike Braithwaite. Did I get that right? Hopefully, I'm pretty close.
You did.
Joining
You did.
us, and so Mike, if you could introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about you and why they should care.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting us. We really appreciate it. My name is
Absolutely.
Mike Braithwaite. I'm the Chief Biological Officer at Modern Atomics, which is a new startup out of Austin, Texas, and we are really bringing some interesting products to the market. And so we're happy to talk a little bit about some of these things tonight.
Great, awesome. Well, I think maybe we jump in, right, and just get right into it. And so, I mean, what's the idea behind the startup? So, what is the product about or products, and where did it come from? Why does it exist?
Great question. So, um, there's kind of some mega trends that are happening globally
Hmm.
around sustainability and energy reduction and saving on energy. As you know, energy pricing has been going up and up and up over the years. If you look at your
Sure.
electricity bills, you probably know that already.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of pretty big efforts that are going on. And so we looked at the shading category, and actually there's quite a few different subsystems that our technology helps with. The first one we're tackling is on these shade motors, because all of the power supplies that are available for them right now, they're very inefficient. They really waste a lot of power, and we can talk about why that is, and so forth. But we just saw it as kind of a low hanging fruit. Our same technology will be useful in things like video walls, and other types of distribution, and even other theater type products too. So
Okay. So to get this straight in my head. So these are power supply devices that would sit behind a number of other things, and the idea is to reduce the total energy consumption of the system.
that's you got it. You got it.
Okay.
There's quite a few things that it does that other power supplies cannot do, but that's one of the big ones, is that it removes the wasted operational QS and current. So, like for example, if you have a even in your home theater, excuse me, you might have like a projection screen, and the
Mhm.
projection screen, rolls up and rolls down. So how many times do you roll that up and down? You know,
Not a huge amount, yeah.
so you roll it down and watch some movies, and then you roll it up and all that. Well, most of those screens are AC connected,
Right.
and they're powered, so the power is there all the time. And so
Mhm.
you only actually moved it a few times, but the power is present throughout the whole motor. And the reason it's there is they don't know when you are going to grab your remote or your tablet or tell Alexa to lower the screen. So since they don't know that, they just have to leave it on all the time so that when the command comes in. And so all of that time when you're not moving the screen, that's the type of power that we eliminate using our power supply. And by the way, you're going to need to do so in a theater. It's very useful for a screen, or for lowering your projector, or for masking treatments, or for window treatment, like if you're controlling the ambient light. If you're doing any of that, you're going to use some of these motors like this. The bigger projects are where you're doing the whole house. So I'm motorizing all the windows in the whole house. And if I'm
Sure, right.
motorizing all of the windows, I'm probably going to have a big power distribution unit, and the shade brands all sell their versions of it. And that's usually in equipment closet. Sometimes it's in the theater, sometimes it's like behind the rack and things like that. And that's really where this first product that we have called Reactor kind of finds its little niche in there, because we're not asking you to buy something different or something in addition to what you already have. We're saying, instead of purchasing those standard power supplies that all of those vendors sell, just buy the motor and the screen without it, and then we will sell you a power distribution unit that controls it perfectly.
Okay. Now, so would that unit also include the kind of the logic behind everything, like telling it when to open, close, and all that kind of stuff? So really, from the shade manufacturer, you're just getting the actual physical shade and the motor that turns it, and then your unit would control would have all of the brains and power, so to speak, right? So the the control system would all function with modern atomics.
So there is some of that, what you're saying, and it depends on the level of automation that you're doing.
Okay.
Um, what some people use when they're doing a theater or shades, sometimes they'll just have a small keypad, like a wall keypad that's on the
Sure.
wall, or like a remote, like literally an RF remote, or
Mhm.
even an IR remote in some cases. But in those cases where they're very simple controls, you got it. There's nothing else needed. You actually plug those into the power supply, and there's no software needed either. So there's nothing to download. There's nothing to go on somebody's website, and there's no dip switches to set, and nothing like that. You basically plug the keypad into a device port on the power supply. You plug the motor into the motor port. There's one button that says pair. It pairs those devices together, and you're done. You're ready. I mean, literally 10 seconds later, you're controlling the device.
That's
So
cool.
in some of these brands, that's pretty complex. What I just said there in 10 seconds, that's not possible with a lot of these brands, because you're going to
Right.
need to download some configuration tool. You have to load it on your PC. You're going to have to learn, discover the devices, then kind of create a little program to. So all of that is done in the background. So our power supply, it's not just a power supply. It does have a very advanced processing inside, and all of the protocols for these motors are already in it. So,
Okay.
so
Right
yes,
on. So
depending on what you're doing, there isn't anything else you need. Now, those were basic. If
mhm.
you're doing advanced things, like more advanced things with third-party control,
Yeah, like
or
a
more.
Savant or a Control 4 or a Crestron or a
Right. So then you still need those other controls if that's what you're ultimately doing. But for somebody who all they're trying to do is, I have a couple windows where I'm doing some window treatment and I have a projection screen to load down, I don't need anything else. I'm actually done. And again, no software needed to do any of this. So,
right on. So I think we should, show this to people so they can see it now. But before we jump into that, all the folks out in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to drop those up and we'll answer those as they come along. Have a handful of people that have spoke up. Mad Prawn is out there and
howdy.
Double A is out there as well. And we have one of my favorite companies is lurking out here. I guess they're not lurking because they're actually commenting, and that's Just Video Walls. And they say Michael and his team's engineering is legendary, not just good, not just awesome, but the stuff of legends. And they're very excited to see these in action at CEDIA this year, as am I. And they're going to get to see them up close and personal at CEDIA. Is that right?
Absolutely. You know what's wonderful about Just Video Walls is, and we were mentioning this right before the show, but um, we were in the Cedia web launch area, which is a place for like startups. The
Hmm.
launch, they call it the launch pad, and in that launch pad area, you'll have a startup like us. So we're a brand new company. We've only been a company for a few months now, and we kind of got scared because where we were at the CEDIA show floor was all the way in the back, the furthest back corner of the convention center that you can get. That's where we were, and we were like, is anybody actually going to come over here and see us? And so we saw a booth that opened up right next to Samsung, but it was a bigger booth, like a 40 by 30 booth. And we're like, we can't, we're a little, we're a
That's a
little
lot of
nobody,
scratch right there.
and
Yeah.
we can't afford that big of a booth next to Samsung. But we also have friends, and some of our friends at Just Video Walls also wanted to kind of move. So we both took that booth and we shared that area that's there. So right now we're right up front with a lot of the other ones. So, and if it wasn't for Just Video Walls, we wouldn't be there. We'd still be in the back corner. So
Right on. Well, I'm glad you're going to be up front, right beside Samsung, right?
yeah, it's right across the aisle from where Samsung is. If you look, you'll see we're not allowed to talk about what Just Video Wall are showing, but there's going to be some amazing stuff right next to where
That's cool.
Samsung stuff is. So,
Yeah, no. So for folks that don't know, and this is just 30 seconds on Just Video Walls. Last year at CEDIA, they showed off some wonderful technology. And as far as videos go, they're about to join the 500,000 club on my channel. So they're like 498,000 or something, or 99 now, with their short content from last year, which is the #2 CEDIA video for me last year. So really, really well performing video. And that's all because of Skylar and his eloquent, discussion of the tech there. He did a really wonderful job with that. But they have great, beautiful displays. And I don't know what the scuttlebutt is, but everybody's like, "Oh, you just can't wait to see what's going to happen." And I'm like, "Can you tell me?" They're like, "No." I was like, "Mike, do you know?" He's like, "I know, but I can't tell you either." I'm like, "Oh, I want to know." So everybody,
too bad we don't have Blake on here. He would tell you. No, I'm just
there. You go. There you go. Let's get Blake. Where are you at? Come on, you're in the audience, right?
I know.
But everybody should make sure to stop by the booth so they can see both of these wonderful brands. But anyway, enough about those guys. This is all about you. So what's the best way to show this? Should I pull up that presentation or should I show the website? What do you think is good? Because people want to see this reactor and see what it looks like.
Well, we have that little commercial. You can show that 30-second video.
The video? Okay, yeah. Let's see if I can make this work. I haven't quite done it like this before, but here we go. All right, let me get to there. We go. Hopefully everybody can hear this okay. I like the meter. Like
I've been riding roller coasters, and the speed is just right. Dipping in grassy oceans, I'm gonna get mine. Wrong way on the one way, but my soul beat right in time. Time travel gonna ride. Supersonic, don't fly. Don't slow down.
Nice. Okay, so that brings up a number of questions for me, right? Okay, so this is a power supply.
Yes.
But it says no power supply. I mean, so help me with my dissonance in my brain here.
Yes.
Of what and then on the front, there's a ton of what look like Ethernet ports, right? And on the back, there's what looks like a bunch of Phoenix connectors or something. So, and then there's a VU meter. So what's going on here? I mean, talk us through this thing.
It's like, what kind of power supply is
this?
It?
What is this steampunk behemoth? What are we doing?
What's funny, just one last thing on Just Video Walls. We were on, they have a really cool series, if you guys haven't seen it, that is about integrators. And one of the things that we had one of those reactors, and we were showing all this stuff and had a motor running and all this, and Skylar looks over there and he says, "Wait, how come there's nothing plugged in? There's no power." And it's like, yeah, that's why it's called reactor. And so the funny thing on this product is, and you see it in that video, but it's going so fast and maybe you don't notice, there is no power input. So there's no IEC cable on the back. There's nothing on the front. There's not even a little DC little round.
Yeah, that little round barrel port.
There is no AC input. So hence the name reactor. Now, the way it works is the RJs that you saw on the front.
Yeah, the RJ45s.
Those are RJ45s. Most of what those are used for are devices like keypads and RF receivers and transceivers and things like that. Sensors, things like that usually is what's plugging into that. There's also some motor ports for the smaller torque motors that also use the RJ45 as their communication connection. And so 8 of the ports on the front are for what we would consider 2 Newton meter or lower torque motors.
Okay.
If it's anything above 2 Newton meter, So like on a big projection screen, like what you guys would have or show, with a big projector and stuff, those are going to be over 2 Newton meters. So those are the larger, the Phoenix style ones you saw on the back.
On the other side, yeah.
Yeah, on the other side, and there's 14 on the other side. So you can plug 14 different of those motors on the back. So we still haven't talked about power. On the device ports, there's one port that is called the bus in, and there's one port that's called the bus out. That's so that you can link multiple of these power supplies together, or if you have different motor types, because there's other PDUs like this for PoE motors and for AC. And so it depends on what type of motor that you're running. On the bus in is where we do what's called harvesting. And so on the bus in, you can use things like, if you already are familiar with shades, Somfy and others build little PoE injectors
Yep.
that you can just plug one of those PoE injectors into the bus in. And
Right.
those are like little tiny, like little, they can fit in your hand, a small little injector. They don't really have a lot of power. They're only really useful for plugging in a keypad or plugging in a sensor or something
Sure.
like that. They're not really, you can't use them to run motors. But in this case, you do. So that's the only thing you're plugging in. Now, if you don't have one of those, or if you have like if you're into the Tesla, like their solar roof or their solar panels, you can also take the panels before the converter, before the inverter. You can take one of the like a solar roof segment, and you can run that into the bus end too. And so in that case, you have zero power connection at any time. It's only being run off the solar roof.
So does it have a battery internal so that at nighttime?
inside, so good question. Inside, there is what we call an ESM module, or energy storage module.
Okay.
And this is the point where some people wonder about this, but in energy storage modules, we put, let me make a couple general comments, because some people sometimes get worried when the word battery or things like that come up. And so, number one, this has a 10-year transferable warranty. We build this power supply because this is going in a building or a residence, and it has to last a long time. We build it to last 20 years. We put a 10-year transferable warranty on it. And there are no conflict minerals of any kind anywhere in this. Where again, we go back to the sustainability. So there's no cobalt, there's no any kind of what they would call bad minerals inside of this. And so when you look at shades are powered usually multiple ways. You have either a line level like AC power.
Yep.
You have a DC power, low voltage type motors. You have a PoE powered motors. And then you also have these lithium powered motors. The lithium powered motors have batteries usually on the inside of the tube of the motor.
Yeah. So my only powered shades are battery, because I didn't want to retrofit in electrical. So
yeah, you didn't have wires to them, and so that's why those lithium ones are so popular.
Right. Yep.
You don't have those, and so there's nothing. I mean, people install those every day. Well,
yeah.
What type are the shades that you have that have the
power shades?
So power shades. Okay, so there you have kind of a PoE. We can come back to why I said kind of, but you have a PoE motor, which has a battery inside. The PoE coming into it is trickle charging the battery. So that's the reason I say it that way, is there really are PoE motors also. I'm not here to piss off power shades or anybody or anything like this. But what I'm saying is there are shades that don't have batteries in them, but can negotiate with a real PoE device like ours. Right. And so our device can negotiate all the levels of BT power. And so there are some. Now, power shade ones, there's nothing wrong, but you can plug in a PoE input and it will trickle charge the battery that's inside. So, but what I'm saying is, in those batteries that are in your shade, there are conflict minerals, and there
Sure,
is
absolutely.
alcohol. And so, anyways, the reason we point that out is some people get a little scared of that. This is the latest chemistry. There are several patents that the UT of Texas has, and there's several patents that we have on this. These kinds of batteries are really only used in we see them in the some of the whole house big, where they're trying to cover the power for your entire house. Like if you really did have a Tesla roof and you had solar roof on every tile and stuff like that, they'll build those in. You see the same kind of chemistry, the same kind of cathode and anode chemistry that we have, but the difference is it's not the lithium iron where you can actually run into problems. We have our processor inside is controlling the battery management at all times. We're measuring every single thing. So there's no possible way, and there's no Google. You can go, we're on YouTube right now. You could go Google right now this type of chemistry, and you will not find a video of a skateboard on fire or a cell phone or a laptop on fire and things like that. So this has to last a long time, and it has to be durable. The side problem is you can't build with this type of chemistry. This is lipo 4. You can't build this type as dense and as small as you can on the lithium ion type. So that's the trade-off. Is it's a great chemistry, I just can't get as much power in. So that's why this reactor, when you are at the show, grab one and pick it up.
Okay, right on.
You will remember. You will remember. If you're familiar with, you guys do all kinds of high-end audio all the time. You have very nice amplifier manufacturers that are in here, and you know what some of those amplifiers weigh.
Yeah, they're huge. They have huge toroidal chunks of metal, and
Huge toroids,
they're crazy.
thick metal, thick aluminum, thick all. I mean, there's a reason they weigh a lot. This has thin metal, like 1 millimeter thick metal, very thin. When you pick this up, you will be reminded of one of those amplifiers.
Really,
that's the first thing
nice.
that most people say is they're like, "Why is this so heavy?"
Right.
And so, anyways, it takes that. So
That's awesome. Well, just a couple of one comment here. So, Rowena Lonto, maybe, great product, Mike and team. So excited for this. We're excited as well. So hopefully Rowena will be able to join everybody at CEDIA. And then one of my mainstays here on the channel has joined, Hi-Fi Haven. He's a fellow Coloradian. I don't know. I would say he lives in Colorado too. So happy to have you out there. And remember, folks out there in the audience, if you're just joining, we have Modern Atomics here with us tonight, and this is Mike, and he is telling us all about the reactor product, which is a kind of a game-changing methodology around power management, power supply for what could be lots of different applications, but specifically we're talking about motors for shades. Here Supernova has joined. He's like, I'm late. You're late, man. Come on now, be on time.
Well, we'll catch you up real quick.
Right on. So,
one other thing that you mentioned,
keep going.
You were talking about the little gauge on the front, and
here I'm gonna maybe there's a picture here. Okay, so you can see this here. There's a gauge right there in the center, and it moves like this, but I don't know how fast it moves or how much it moves, but it moves.
Well, okay, so the reason that gauge is there is most people are unaware of this quiescent current. Like, to be honest, there's a lot of names that people have for that. The idle current. In California, they've even passed some laws that are called vampire current. Like you're still in this energy. They're trying to regulate that. But we would always call that quiescent current, like operational quiescent current. It means when there's no load on the circuit. So you have all this power and you have all these motors, for example, you have this power, but there's nothing happening. So there's no load. And so what is the amount of current that's being taken right there? And
gotcha.
because not many people talk about quiescent current problems, we decided, you know what? They're not, who are we? No one knows who Modern Atomics are. So 5 guys and a dog in Austin. And so are they going to believe that these motors have this problem of quiescent current? So what that gauge is, it's a very sophisticated ammeter. And so as soon as you plug in one of those motors, you will see the gauge move, and that is the quiescent current that it's measuring right there. And we've measured all the motors that are used within the CEDIA and the VIXA type markets in the commercial and residential. And there isn't a motor we've tested that doesn't have some level of quiescent current, but it will show you what it is. And the more you plug in, you'll see that gauge go higher and higher. So if you have 20 motors plugged in, you'll see that gauge is all the way over. So that's showing you how much quiescent current is actually right now flowing to those motors. And there's a button on the front that's called the eco mode. As soon as you click that button, a little green light comes on. There's like a little green leaf by it. And that green light comes on, and you'll see the gauge drop. Now, that could be just tricks that we have in the software, but now I challenge you, just pull out your little handy dandy multimeter, go put your leads on the outputs of any of the motors, or go up to the motor itself. You'll see that there is no power any longer there. So we've removed the power from all these motors. Okay, well, if that's the case, then how does, when you go to that button on your keypad or your touch panel, or you hit the button, what happens? So when these motors are usually connected up to a power supply like this, the communication is going through those cables. And so there's different topologies that are available in these motors. You have things like Zigbee. Zigbee is a wireless mesh network, and the new that's kind of the old name. There used to be something called the Zigbee Alliance. It's now called the Connectivity Standards Alliance, and the new versions of all this is when you hear somebody says something about Matter. I'm using Matter 1.3 is the newest one, and I'm using Thread as the radio. So when they say stuff like that, it's the same thing. This is a wireless mesh network. And so in those wireless mesh networks, again, they'll have a lithium battery that's in the motor itself, and the ones that you have are connected. So you have a Cat 5. If you have power shades,
well, mine are just purely battery only. So there's no, they're not PoE. There's no, and when I want to charge them, I pull out a dongle and plug in.
So you've got the battery ones. I apologize for my earlier mistake.
Your battery ones. Yeah.
Okay. So you have the battery ones only. And so how often do you charge them? Like once 6 months, a year?
6 months. Yeah.
So depending on how often you use them, or how much traffic is on the network that you're controlling it with, it should last for 6 months to a year before you have to charge them. By the way, if you come to our booth, 3520 at CEDIA, there's another product built by a different company called Chronopower. And it also works with reactor, by the way. And so this Chronopower does a couple of neat things. It can, if you have a Cat 5 going to them, and you still chose to use the battery for whatever reason, this product will check in with them, and when they need to be recharged, it will recharge them automatically. So
that's
if you have
cool.
20 shades, it's kind of a cool piece, and you can just connect it in. The reactor will give that Chronopower the actual power. Usually, if you don't have a reactor, they have like a power supply and other stuff used with it. But in this case, you have a reactor, so you just connect one of the Cat 5s up to it and connect it out by the shade, and it will automatically charge them for you. And it's kind of a cool product. It won the best new product at the IWCE this year and stuff like that. So really cool stuff. Come by our booth. I don't believe it's anywhere else in the CEDIA, so we're probably the only place at CEDIA that you can even see that product.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Nifty. Yeah.
So that's a cool aspect of that. Okay, but let's go back to Zigbee for a second, or even on yours on the power shades. Is it like an RF transmitter of how you?
It's there's an RF, so it's not IR, it's RF. And I'm gonna do a a video about their gateway as well, so you can go in
Cool.
and do all the automation and that kind of stuff. Just, it's the very simple their version just to control their shades.
They're good guys. They're
Yeah,
good
yeah,
guys
absolutely.
at Power Shades for sure. And I definitely don't want to give them the wrong impression. We do like Power Shades, and we do like everything that they're doing. So on the RF side, this is what happens inside the motor. Inside the motor, for that type, this is usually what we would call a sub gigahertz type transmission. Okay,
Okay.
and so meaning it's below 1 gigahertz
Yep.
frequency wise, and the popular ones are in the 433, but there's also some in the 800s and 900 megahertz range, but usually they're going to be in like the 430 range megahertz. Okay, so in that motor, it does turn off the power to the drive and the processor and everything, but there's one little circuit in there. We used to call those CDMAs, which is like carrier detect little circuits. And so
Mhm.
all it's doing is it's listening for that frequency.
Yeah,
Like
it's
if
gotta
you hit
wait. It's gotta wait. Yeah, it's gotta
and
wait for it.
if it sees it, now it doesn't know what to do with it, but if it sees that signal, it then turns on its processor and turns on the rest of the board. And then the rest of the board sees it and does know what to do with that message. It says, oh, I want to go to the upper limit or lower limit or whatever. That if it didn't have that, you'd have to be recharging those shades like every few days, kind of like your cell
Right.
phone. You'd have to do that.
Yep.
So what it does, because of that little carrier detect circuit, it can keep the battery life low. On these bigger shades, the bigger torque shades, which have these wires like going through a power supply like reactor,
Uh-huh.
they're usually communicating like serial. And so there's serial messages that come from all the various control systems, usually over an IP connection. And those come in and they're like, hey, I want to send this motor at this node ID to this percent or to the upper limit or to this intermediary position, wherever it is, right? And so when those movement commands come in, the motor is usually powered and it responds to it and it acts, right? Okay, but movement commands are very rare. So let's do the interactive part of this session. We asked this a little bit differently earlier, but now let's just talk about shades. We're
Okay,
just talking
sure.
about shades for one moment. How often do people use shades every day? Like what's the average?
Well, I can tell you my average, and then you can tell me what it is for everybody else. So for us, on most days, in the morning, the shade goes up and it stay so we have like a dual layer shades, right? So the
Nice.
blackout goes up and then the hazy shade stays.
Like the
And
light
then
filtering, you have a
yeah,
light
the light
filtering
filtering.
one. Okay.
Sometimes the light filtering will go up and down once a day, and then at the end of the day, the blackout shade on the back comes back down, and that's usually our normal cadence with shades.
So how many times did it move?
Moved up once, moved down once, and that's every day. You get one up, one down per shade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So two times it moved
Yes, two
in that
times.
24-hour cycle, right?
Right.
Okay, next question for you. How long does it take to get from your upper position to either the lower position or an intermediary, wherever,
Yeah.
whatever you think? Like,
Sure.
let's go to the worst case. It's going to go all the way down to the lower
Yeah,
position.
like 15, 20 seconds, something like that.
15, 20 seconds. Okay. So we just said that on the average time, it's doing it twice. And 15, 20 seconds is how long it took, right?
Mhm.
So both of those times is 40 seconds,
40 seconds max. Yeah.
right? So what is what is the motor doing for the other 23 hours and 59 minutes and 20
It's in
seconds?
20 seconds.
Okay.
It's
So
hanging out.
in your case, you have a CDMA and it turned off the board in the battery in the shade. If you had a bigger shade or a projection screen or something like that where it needed more torque, the battery shades really only go up to, the biggest ones we've really seen is 3 Newton meter. But if you have a big 200-inch screen, that's a big motor that's in there. That's not like a 3
Mhm.
Newton meter motor. So anything above 3 Newton meter it's going to need one of these other motor types. And so there is no battery. There is no way to turn that off. So what happens is it's connected to our power supply. And so, do you have a control system? You were mentioning about Control 4.
No, not right now. Yeah.
So you just have like the handheld remotes and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Okay, no worries. So commands come in two forms. Some commands are what we call movement commands. Like,
Mhm.
hey, I want to go to the upper limit. Hey, I want to stop. Hey, I want to go to the lower limit. Those are kind of movement type commands. Okay. If you have a control system like a Control 4, Savant, Crestron Home, whatever, any of these devices that are out, or even like voice systems and some of these other control systems, a lot of the commands coming in are queries. So when you have some of these, like let's say you have a Crestron touch panel,
Mhm.
and on the touch panel, there's little cute little icons with a little graphic of the shade up and down. And if you have a big house, you can see all of these, right? So these queries on some of these drivers, they're happening all the time. Like every 15 seconds, a query will come
Mhm.
through and it will say, what's your position?
Yeah, it just
You
continually polls. It's polling.
continually polling. So if you
Yeah.
have a whole network of these, you have 25 of these, this is constantly pinging these. So the thing is, now usually the shade has power, and so they respond back to the query. But in our case, we just said we remove the power, and you could take your digital multimeter out to that and see that there
Right.
is no power there. So what happens is when you connect the shades or the projection screen into our power supply, the very first time we do an auto discovery, we discover it, we capture the node ID, we capture the current position, we capture any intermediate positions, any groups, all that stuff is captured and stored inside the power supply. So now what happens when we remove power and those queries come in, our power supply answers just like the motor
Yeah,
does. In
that's
fact,
great. Yeah.
all of these control systems and drivers and stuff, they all still work. They think they're talking to the motor, but they're not. They're talking to the power supply. Now, if a movement command comes in, we do then apply power and then relay the command. And you can't tell the difference. It takes most of these motors take about 20 to 30 milliseconds when we apply power to when we can send the command. But on Zigbee, I'll give you an example. If you have a Zigbee shade, what I'm saying is faster than the way Zigbee or Thread works, or
Right.
on how Matter works. Because on those motors, they don't have a carrier detect like what you have. What they do is they wake up the radio. So their whole board goes to sleep, including the radio, and then they wake up the radio, just the radio, not the rest of the processor. But they send out a message to their parent.
Mhm.
So the parent is usually an edge router or something. It could
Sure.
be the coordinator, but it's usually something in between, like an edge router. So they send out a message saying, do you have any messages for me? And then the edge router or the coordinator then replies and says either no, I don't, or yes, there's a movement command going in. So it goes back. If there's no command, it says, okay, cool. And it goes back to sleep for another 50 milliseconds. In another 50 milliseconds, it wakes up again. Hey, do you have any messages for me? And this time now he did hit a button and they said yes. And then they say, we need you to go to upper position. Okay, so in our case, what we do is the same thing as like what the Matter ones do. So when a movement command comes in, we if it's a query, we respond back. But if it's a movement command, we turn on the power, and then 20 to 30 milliseconds, we send the command to the motor.
Right.
The motor then goes wherever it's going. At the end of that, we then get the new position, store that information, and then we wait a few minutes because maybe you want to tweak it or adjust it or do,
Right.
hey, it's not exactly where I wanted it. But after a couple minutes, remember, we have 23 hours and 59 minutes to play with. So we give them a couple more minutes. And then if there's still no commands coming in, we turn the power back off. And then now we answer the new queries and stuff like that. That's how we remove all the quiescent current. And it's enough. So do you know that the average shade project, just by removing this quiescent current, will save you 412 kilowatt hours every year.
That's
Now all you have to
crazy.
do is go look at your electricity bill, how much per kilowatt hour it is, That's how much it costs you just to have those shades plugged in. We're not talking about them moving yet. We're just talking about them being plugged in.
Just sitting around doing nothing, waiting.
So you can see that this actually starts to add up. Not to mention that you have power supplies with AC plugged in. And the big problem is that these companies don't make their own power supplies. And I know that's going to come to a huge shock. It's going to come to a huge shock to you. In fact, if you want, we could go back to the slides for a second, and I'll show
sure.
you.
Here, let me pull it up.
I'll show you a graph.
There we go.
All right. Do you see this?
Yeah, I can see you got Alpha and OK and Dindo and
Looks like NASCAR, huh?
yeah.
Okay. So, which of these brands? These are all good brands. We're not here disparaging anyone, first of all. Which of these brands makes their own power supplies for their shades? I mean, there's pretty big brands on here.
I'm trying to find one that looks like it's in a foreign language from Asia. Those might make their own power supply. Yeah, I wouldn't even be able to guess. No idea. BTX does it.
So the truth is, there's only 2 companies that are making from the ground up power supplies for these motors. So we're one of them, and Lutron is the other one. When you look at these power supplies, and people are going to argue now, this is going to be a very, hey, this is controversial. They just said that my favorite brand doesn't make their own power supplies. So these are images of all the power supplies that you guys believe that they're making. And they all have their names on them. These are all name brand popular power supplies. But if you look in the little colored circles, those are Meanwell power supplies. So this is 95% of the whole market. So when we say they're not engineering and making their own power supply, it's because they're not. These are Meanwell power supplies. There's nothing wrong with Meanwell power supplies, by the way. It's just that Meanwell power supplies are off the shelf. These are generic designs. They are built to do a variety of applications, like lighting and all kinds of things, networking, security, sensors, all kinds of stuff. But what they don't do, they don't have specific requirements for DC motors. They don't have ultra low operational quiescent current like we were just talking about, and they don't have the ability to handle high levels of ESD. So they just don't have those requirements. So let's look for just a second. Here's like a lighting or a networking or security. If you have an LED lighting system, not a filament bulb, but a LED lighting, when you turn it on, up the left is how much amperage, for example. And we're talking about 24 volts DC. And then along the bottom is time. So if I flip on this LED lighting, you'll see that there's a nice little curve comes on. It's 1.5 amp at 24 volt and it goes on. And then on the right is when I turned it off. So that's what those look like. Now let's look at one of these motors. So here is the same thing, 24 volts on one of these motors. And maybe you're noticing something different. So in this motor at 24 volt, it has a huge inrush of current. And this is for every shade that you have. So that inrush comes in. And then over time, it kind of levels out. But if you notice on the right side, there's another kind of a dip up. And if you look at the time, this is usually doesn't happen. In other words, the motor itself turns off before you usually get this far. Remember, you said the shade was only moving 20 seconds. So 20 seconds is not very far into this. But what that thing on the end is what's called stall current. And so sometimes stall current can happen at other times. What this would be is like the shade starts moving down and it actually mechanically bumps into something. And so this is where this stall current will come in. So what that means is your power supply no longer can you just spec what the power that was actually needed. you actually have to account for this huge inrush current. And so now, if you look, there's a purple dotted line. So these off-the-shelf power supplies have to account, even though they only need that for like less than 80 milliseconds, you still have to have it, because if you don't have that current, the motor won't even turn. So now you're causing insult to injury, because now you're getting a power supply that's twice as big as what's really needed. And now you're bringing up all kinds of other problems. You create heat problems with this, because the power supply for 99.75% of the time, or 23 hours and 59 minutes of every day, is just sitting there burning off heat. And this is all this operational quiescent current. So the power supplies that we make are designed with these ultra efficient power supply for exactly DC motors. So we have different stages. So most of the communication and all that is done, and we haven't even gone to our ESM. Earlier, we were talking about an ESM module. Our ESM module can deliver high amounts of current, because remember, we have 22 motor ports. So I have to have 22 of these giant motors, 200-inch screens. Like, I don't know if many people have that in their home theater, but if you can imagine in a school or in a commercial building where you have all these classrooms and I have 20 screens like that, they all maybe want to go up at the same time. So our power supply can supply all that, even though we have no AC input and no power coming in. We're just harvesting little bits of power. But that's because we have this ESM. So the ESM comes in, takes over when you're doing this. And there is a side benefit to all this. Because we have the ESM, if you happen to have a power outage, or in California, our California reps, they give me a lot of crap about this, but if you have a rolling blackout going on right now, all of these motors still work. So they'll still work for up to like 3 weeks. And all the keypads or anything else that's plugged into our reactor as the power supply still will work too. So that's kind of a side benefit. So we can go back, we can go off this because we already talked about these questions. But I wanted you to at least see that part of it. Just because
that's really cool. And I do like the way that even just even though it's an elementary feature, the battery, right? This stuff will work when there's no power. Literally, the power could be out to your house and you can still operate the shades.
It's awesome. True. Even in Austin a couple of years ago, we had like an ice storm. It was kind of a freaky ice storm where where we lost power for like 4 or 5 days. And so in some cases, if these are over your bedroom, your master bath, or things like that, or it's your only way for light to come in and things like that, it is helpful.
You want to open them. Yeah, you want to open them for sure.
And then the other feature that a lot of people like, if you're not into the energy savings and all of that, the truth is the ability to automatically go to the or automatically program the keypads is a pretty big deal to a lot of people.
Right on.
And that helps. Some people at this point, they're like, these must be super expensive power supplies. They're not.
It seems like they would be super expensive power supplies.
It seems that way. And Tim Marshall, who's our chief power officer, who also doubles as our chief financial officer, likes to ride me about this, but we're 50% lower than all the other power supplies. So not only do we have all these cool features, we're already half the price of what a comparable, well, there are no real comparable type power supplies, but what somebody would buy from a power supply point of view. So you can deploy it faster. It's lower cost. It saves money. It programs the user interface. So I don't need any software and all this. I mean, if you're coming to see it, come over and just look at it. Everyone who ever looks at it or touches it, they're like, I have to order one of these. So if you're in the shade business, you'll want to definitely check it out.
That's cool. So, I'm going to do 3 shades in the room that I'm in now. I've just got bare windows down here. I will make sure to chat with you ahead of time to figure out exactly what the right stuff is to get
Absolutely.
to get this room done up. So as we wind down here, there's one last question that I think is super duper important, right? So we know where people can see this technology at, coming up here soon in September, right?
Yeah.
Everybody go to Cedia, check it out. But if there's somebody else out there that says, I want some, I'm sold, I've watched this video and I'm ready to buy it. How can they buy it right now? What do they do?
The best thing to do is come to modernatomics.com. And when you're at that website, it'll kind of guide you through some stuff and show you different things, and you can take a look. You need to know what motor type you're doing. So if you're doing a low voltage 45 type motor, the reactor is the one. If you're doing an AC powered 45 type motor, again, big motors. If you're doing those kind of big motors, there's a one called Stellarator. And then if you're doing PoE motors, we have a special one that's called Collider. The PoE motor one will be the biggest hit of all of them, just because there is no programming. There is no network. Sometimes when shade people hear the word PoE, they usually run. And they're like, mostly because they don't have networking knowledge, they don't know how to set up a PoE switch, or they don't buy PoE switches or whatever it is. And so we built Collider for shade people. You don't need to know anything about networking at all. It really looks just like the reactor. Looks like a PDU. There's no AC input. There's no fans. So it has 24 PoE ports. All ports can do 90 watts at the same time.
Wow.
And so we dare you to compare it against any PoE switch on the market. Any PoE switch on the market, if you just set this on top of that, anybody else's switch, you will never use the other switch again. You plug in everything on the back from the motors, and then on the front, you can plug in the keypads just like we were talking about. I can program the keypads with the same one button press, so I don't have to go into any software. I don't need to know IP addresses. I don't need to know networking. I don't need to know anything, and I can program all the PoE motors instantly. And I will tell you that will get you off the job site very fast. The fact that it's a plenum rated PoE half rack 24 port switch with no fans, unheard of. There isn't really anybody that's even close. The closest one to something like that might be a Cisco CDB, which is a much more expensive switch than we are.
Yep.
And can only do 8 ports. So anyways,
yeah, I know my PoE switches that are in my room next door. They're older, and man, they are like little furnaces. They it's so
they have little engines in them, and you can hear them picking up.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, so that's
a fanless PoE switch. It is a real PoE switch. You can plug anything you want into it. It is designed really for shades, but it is really a PoE BT switch. So
will it do just normal network data? Yeah, so it does it all. Okay, that's kind of cool.
That's sweet. It's a normal switch, but it's specially designed so that you don't have to know anything else. It has built-in DHCP, built-in LLDP. It already has all of the protocols that a PoE switch needs. So if you're putting in PoE motors, this is one that you'll want to take a look at 100%. Because there isn't any other switch in the whole CD market that can even hold a candle to it. And again, it does everything that the reactor does. It's just with PoE motors.
Right on. That's cool. Well, everybody out there, make sure drop by Cedia. Booth number again?
It's 3520.
3520. Right up front.
And I'm sorry, there is one more thing. On Friday, September 6th, it's the Friday of Cedia, at 3 o'clock to 4:30. We are having a manufacturer training session in room 111 or 111. In room 111, it is the future of motorized shade. And we're going to show everything that we just talked about: reactors, colliders, stellarators, all that kind of stuff. We have another product called Tokamak, which we don't have time to go into that, but that's for like really big systems. Like if you have several hundred shades, like in Austin here, there's a gigafactory that has like 400 shades. So we have this Tokamak, which is like a giant PoE high very high current PoE switch. And so that's for things like that. But come to our class. There are several things you're going to learn. You'll learn about any motor type. So PoE, low voltage, AC, or lithium. We're joined by the CEO of Chrono Power, John McKenzie, will be there, and also the CEO of Olibra, which, if you're familiar with Bond, he's the CEO. They're the ones that make Bond. So
Yep.
it's myself from Modern Atomics. It's John McKenzie from Chrono Power, and Zohar Shiner from Olibra or Bond. And we're
Right
going
on.
to show you incredible new innovations. You can take Bond's new sensor. They have a sensor called a Breeze Pro. Usually that works with other sub gigahertz type products like the Bond Home and the Bond Bridge Pro
Yep.
and different RTS and other, not just RTS, but any kind of sub gig type motor. If you have a reactor, that same Breeze Pro will also do the same thing for a PoE motor or for a low voltage motor or for a Zigbee motor. So if you have a
Nice.
Zigbee motor and you want a Breeze Pro Breeze Pro is like the world's best ultrasonic sensor for rain, wind, sun, temperature, like
Gotcha.
all this stuff. It's an awesome product. We'll have one in our booth in 3520, but also if you go to Bond Bridge into their booth, they'll have one. But we will show you how that same sensor can work with any motor, not just sub gigahertz type motors.
That's nifty. Cool. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Exciting stuff. There's the amazing thing about CEDIA is that there's always this stuff that you didn't know
Yes.
that's going to be there that's super interesting, and this is one of those things. I can't wait to see the gear. So I think we're going to go ahead and close it at this point. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody out in the audience, thank you for coming and joining and watching. Remember, like the video, share it, tell your friends, spread the word, make sure everybody knows about Modern Atomics. And I think if somebody, aren't you guys like giving away like if people want to come to CEDIA and they don't have a badge, you can help folks get
You know
in.
what? Absolutely. We actually go to our modernatomics.com site. At the very top of the site, click on it, and it will give you a free registration to CEDIA. So you click on it, put in
That's
your name
cool.
and information, and no cost. So,
Right on. So Hi-Fi Haven, I expect to see you at CEDIA this year because you would go nuts there. You would not be able to leave without having some new toys on the list to buy for later. Okay. Again, Mike, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see everybody in the next video.